Selina Hartwell did not cry when her husband told her he saw her as capable, but not as an equal. She set down her teacup, careful, not a drop spilled, pressed both palms flat against the dining room table, and made the only decision she had left to make. That evening, she walked out of Hartwell House with one traveling bag, 8 years of careful silence, and the small amount of money she had saved in a tin behind the linen closet. If you want to know whether a woman like that came home, and whether he deserved it when she did, stay until the end. Subscribe to Edwardian Hearts and drop your state in the comments. Let's see how far this one travels. Yorkshire, England, autumn 1907. The moors had gone brown and gold by the time the argument happened, which was not quite the right word for it. Arguments require both parties to raise their voices, and Selina had not raised her voice since she was 19 years old and had decided that quiet was more effective than loud. The thing that happened between Selina and Clifford Hartwell on the evening of October the 4th was something smaller, and, in its own way, considerably more final than an argument. It started over a warehouse. The Hartwell family owned a textile mill on the edge of Kenton. 3 floors of looms, 40 workers, contracts with wool merchants across Yorkshire, and as far south as Manchester. Clifford had inherited it at 28 from his father, who had inherited it from his father before him. It was a good mill, well run, profitable in most years. What Clifford did not know, what he had never thought to ask, was that the eastern warehouse on the mill's property, the one that had sat mostly empty for 3 years before Selina married into the family, had not been empty for the past 6 years. Selina had arranged that quietly. She had identified 3 small businesses that needed storage and workspace. A seamstress collective, a bookbinder, and a man who repaired clocks. And she had rented them, the space at reasonable rates, handled all the correspondence herself, deposited the income into a separate account she maintained alongside the household books, and used the money to quietly shore up the household budget in the lean years when the mill's contracts ran short. She had not hidden it. She had simply handled it, the way she handled most things, without announcing it first. Clifford had signed a sale agreement on the eastern warehouse that afternoon. He had sold it to a property developer from Leeds, who wanted to knock it down and build a grain depot. He had signed without consulting her. He had not known there was anything to consult about. When she brought it up, over dinner, quietly the way she brought up everything, he looked at her with the patient expression she had come to know very well in 8 years of marriage. The expression of a man waiting for something to pass. The warehouse has been generating income for 6 years, Selina said. I arranged 3 tenants. The seamstress collective alone paid enough to cover the coal bill through last winter. Clifford set down his fork. I didn't know you had tenants in there. I told you about it in 1902. You said to handle it. He paused. I meant the cleaning of it. I know what you meant, Selina said, and I handled considerably more than that. Something shifted in his expression, not guilt, not quite, but the early edge of discomfort. Selina, the mill properties are my responsibility. If you were managing something on the grounds, you should have kept me informed. I sent you a written summary every quarter, she said. You left them on the desk in the study. I don't think you read them. He did not say that he had. The silence between them stretched. And then Selina asked the question she had been carrying for a long time. She didn't plan to ask it that particular evening. It came out of her the way certain true things do. Not chosen, but inevitable. Do you see me, Clifford? Not the house I keep, not the accounts I manage. Me, do you actually see me? He considered it. She would remember that consideration later. The way he set his fork down precisely. The way he seemed to give the question real weight, as though it deserved honest handling rather than a reassuring answer. I see a capable woman, he said. I have always respected what you do here. I hope you know that. She had expected to feel something sharp when he said it. What she felt instead was recognition. She had been circling this moment for years without knowing it. I do know that, she said. That's the problem. She packed lightly. 1 bag. A change of clothes, her father's account ledger. The one he had used to teach her double-entry bookkeeping when she was 11. And the tin from behind the linen closet that held the money she had saved from small economies. Clifford had never once noticed. She moved through the bedroom quickly, with the focused efficiency of a woman who had decided and was not going to undecide. Clifford appeared in the doorway when he heard her moving. What are you doing? I'm going to Aunt Matilda's. She did not look up from the bag. Selina, his voice held something she hadn't heard before, not anger, closer to confusion. I answered your question honestly. I know you did. She folded a blouse and placed it in the bag. I'm grateful for that. Then I don't understand. Because I have been building a life alongside a man who has never once looked at me and wondered who I actually am. She looked up at him then. Her eyes were dry and perfectly clear. I have managed this house and your Mills correspondence and your Eastern warehouse and your household accounts for 8 years, and to you, I am still simply the woman who keeps things running. That is not a marriage, Clifford. That is a household arrangement. He opened his mouth. She lifted the bag. Matilda's house is 12 miles. I'll be there before dark. She walked past him, down the hall, down the staircase of Hartwell House, and out the front door into the cold Yorkshire evening. Clifford stood at the bedroom window and watched her figure move down the drive. Her back was straight. She did not turn around. He told himself she would return by morning. She did not return by morning. Selina arrived at her great-aunt's house in Harrogate at 7:30, having taken the 6 o'clock rail from Kenton. Matilda Vane was 64 years old, had outlived 2 husbands, ran a small but well-organized household entirely on her own terms, and was constitutionally incapable of being surprised by anything. She opened the door, looked at Selina standing on the step with a traveling bag, and said, "Come in then. There's on the stove." Selina sat at the kitchen table while her great-aunt moved around the small warm room and felt, for the first time since dinner, something loosen slightly in her chest, not fixed, not better, but loosened. "Did he hurt you?" Matilda asked, direct as always. "Not in any way that leaves a mark," Selina said. Matilda ladled soup into a bowl and set it down. "What did he say?" "He said he respects me." A pause. "He said I was capable." Matilda sat down across from her. She looked at her niece steadily for a moment. "And that's not what you needed." "It's not what I needed 8 years ago," Selina said. "I told myself it was enough. It isn't." Matilda reached out and put her hand briefly over Selina's. "You going to be all right?" Selina thought about it honestly. Eventually she said, "I think I am." In the morning, Kenton began to talk. The first version of the story was sympathetic to Clifford, as first versions in small mill towns generally are, when the man in question owns the largest employer on the high street. Mrs. Briggs at the draper's said she had always thought Selina Hartwell had too high an opinion of herself. Old Mr. Crail at the solicitor's office said Clifford had given that woman a fine house and a fine name, and if she didn't understand what that was worth, she had misunderstood the arrangement from the start. But there were other voices. Ezra Mott, who had worked the Hartwell mill for 11 years, and had gone to Mrs. Hartwell more times than he could count, when there were problems with supplier contracts or payroll calculations, said nothing publicly. He simply went quiet when the subject came up, and the people who knew Ezra understood what that meant. Mrs. Hartley, the cook, told her sister that Clifford Hartwell had never once looked at what that woman was doing behind the scenes, and that now he was standing in his own house with no idea where anything was. She was not wrong. Clifford discovered this in increments over the first 10 days, and the discovering was not comfortable. The mill's London buyer correspondence had been managed, he found, almost entirely by Selina for the past 3 years. He had not known this, because the letters arrived addressed to the mill, and Selina had intercepted them quietly, responded on his behalf with his signature block, and filed the agreements in a leather binder in the study that he had assumed contained something domestic. He opened it on the 4th day and found 2 years of successful contract negotiations he had no memory of authorizing, because he had not authorized them. Selina had. He wrote her a letter asking about the London accounts. It came back unopened. Inside was a single line in her handwriting. "The correspondence files are in the study. Green binder, 3rd shelf." He stared at that note for a long time. On the 7th day, Ezra came to him about the Eastern warehouse. The developer from Leeds had arrived to do a preliminary inspection, and had found 3 businesses operating on the premises, and wanted to know who was responsible for their tenancy agreements. Mrs. Hartwell handled those agreements, Ezra told him, hat in hand in the tone a man uses when he is being very careful. Clifford rode out to look at the warehouse. He found the seamstress collective working at long tables. Fabric folded in careful stacks, 3 women who looked up at him with the polite wariness of people who do not know whether they are about to be turned out. He found the bookbinder. He found the clockmaker. He found, in the small office off the main floor, a cabinet containing 6 years of ledger entries in Selina's handwriting. Income, expenses, maintenance costs, tenant correspondence, all of it organized, indexed, complete. He drove back to Hartwell House, with a headache. and a feeling that was not quite guilt and not quite grief, and did not have a name he could immediately locate. He went to her sitting room. He had rarely gone in there. It was her room in the way that certain rooms in a house belong to one person, without anyone explicitly deciding it. The place where she did her correspondence and her figures, and he now understood a great deal of the quiet work that kept everything around him functioning. He opened the desk drawers to look for the London contracts. What he found instead was a record of a life he had not known was being lived alongside his. Correspondence with a women's lending society in Leeds. Notes on mill workers' families who had fallen on difficult times, not charitable in tone, practical, as though she had simply identified a problem and was addressing it without making it a story about herself. A separate account book labeled Household Contingency tracking 8 years of small savings, a shilling here, half a crown there, accumulated from economies he had never noticed. At the back of the bottom drawer, a notebook filled with her handwriting, not accounts, not correspondence, her own thoughts, her own observations, things she had never said out loud to anyone. He understood immediately that he should not read it. He held it in his hands for 30 seconds, and then put it back and closed the drawer. Some things, he was beginning to understand, had never been his, even when he had assumed they were. The realization hit him harder than he expected. He sat at her desk until Mrs. Hartley knocked to ask about dinner, and he said yes without turning around, and he stayed at the desk a while longer, looking at the drawer he had closed. He went to Harrogate on the 12th day. He told himself it was because of the warehouse developer, who was threatening to void the sale agreement if the tenancy situation was not resolved. He rode to Matilda Vane's house at 10 in the morning and knocked at the door. Matilda opened it. She looked at him with the measuring expression of a woman who had formed an opinion long ago and was open to additional evidence, though not inclined to rush her conclusions. "Mr. Hartwell," she said. "I'd like to speak to Selina," he said. "If she's willing, and if she's not, I'll go." Matilda looked at him for another moment, then stepped back. "Wait here." He stood on the small porch and looked at Matilda's garden, gone to seed at the end of the season, frost touched at the edges, 2 sparrows working through the remains of a climbing rose. He could hear Selina's and Matilda's voices inside, too low to make out words. Then Matilda returned. "She'll speak to you." Selina came out onto the porch. She had been working, ink stains on her fingers, hair pinned up simply without the care she took with it at Hartwell House. She looked different here, not smaller, the opposite of smaller. "Clifford," she said, not warm, not hostile, just his name. "How are you?" he said. "I'm well." She sat in one of the porch chairs and gestured at the other. "Sit." He sat. He had prepared things to say on the train up. They seemed poorly suited to the moment now. "The warehouse tenant situation," he said. "I need the original agreements to show the developer." "Top drawer of the cabinet in the warehouse office," she said. "The Leeds developer has a legal claim to the property, but not to the tenancy income during the transition period. If he disputes it, the agreements speak for themselves. The Seamstress Collective has a 6-month notice clause." "I didn't know about any of that." "You told me to handle it." "I know," he paused. "I meant something smaller." "I know what you meant," she said. The silence between them had a quality he hadn't expected, not comfortable, but not hostile either. He reached for the things he had prepared. "The London contracts," he said. "I didn't know you had been managing those. You handed me a letter from Hargreaves & Son in March of 1904 and said you didn't have time for correspondence that week. I handled it. The following month they sent another. I handled that too." A pause. "After 6 months they were addressing letters to me directly." "I didn't read the replies," he said. "No," she said, "you didn't." Something moved in his face. Not the discomfort he wore when he thought she was being unreasonable. Something quieter and without a prepared response attached to it. "Selina," he said, and then stopped. He looked at his hands, looked back at her. "Why did you really leave? Not the warehouse. Why did you actually go?" She met his eyes. "Because I asked you if you saw me, and you told me you respected me. And I realized those are not the same thing, and I have known they are not the same thing for 8 years, and I have been telling myself they were." He was quiet for a long time. "That's honest," she said. "I'll give you that." She stood. "The tenancy agreements are in the cabinet. The Hargreaves file is in the green binder, 3rd shelf." "Selina." She went inside. The door closed quietly behind him. He took the evening train home and thought, all the way through the darkening Yorkshire countryside, about the look on her face when she said those are not the same thing. He had given her his honest answer, and his honest answer had been inadequate, and the inadequacy of it was not something he could explain away. He was beginning to understand that explaining away was not going to be available to him with this. Back in Harrogate, Selina stood at Matilda's kitchen window and watched the last light drain from the garden. "He's confused," she said. "He ought to be," Matilda said, bringing tea. "He's never had to think about it before." "He'll have to figure it out himself," Selina said. "I can't do it for him. I've been doing things for 8 years. That's half the problem." She took the tea. Outside the garden went dark and still. "What do you want?" Matilda asked. Selina wrapped both hands around the warm cup. "I want to find out what I want," she said slowly. "For myself, not for the mill, not for Hartwell House, not for what Kenton expects of me." She paused. "I haven't asked myself that in a very long time. I'm not sure I remember how." "Take your time," Matilda said. "The answer will come." It began to come sooner than she expected, and from a direction she hadn't anticipated. There was a women's bookkeeping cooperative in Harrogate. 6 women who kept accounts for small local businesses, most of them widows or single women who had learned figures out of necessity, and found there was work to be done. They had been operating informally for 2 years, doing good work. But their own accounts were in disorder, and 2 banks had denied them a small business loan because they couldn't produce organized financial records. The irony was not lost on anyone who knew them. A mutual acquaintance brought Selina to meet them on her 4th day at Matilda's. She sat with them for 2 hours. She looked at their books, she found the problem within 20 minutes, and spent the rest of the time explaining how to fix it. She came back the next day, and the day after. "You're doing more than you were doing before," Matilda observed. "I have more time now," Selina said, "and I'm choosing how to use it." She paused. "I spent 8 years making myself fit inside someone else's idea of what a wife should be. I don't intend to start making myself small again just because I'm in between things." Matilda made a sound that was neither agreement nor disagreement, the sound of an older woman who has seen enough to know that things rarely resolve the way they should, and the most you can generally hope for is that they resolve honestly. The letter from Clifford arrived on the 15th day. Selina looked at the outside of it for a moment before she opened it, his handwriting on the envelope, controlled and a little stiff, exactly like him. It was not what she had expected. She had expected a practical request about the London contracts, or a report on the warehouse situation. What she found was 2 pages, and the first line read, "I went into your sitting room today to look for the Hargreaves file. I found other things instead." He described finding the contingency account book, the correspondence with the Leeds Lending Society, the notes on the mill workers' families. He described the warehouse cabinet, the 6 years of ledger entries, sitting in the small office among the seamstresses and the bookbinder and the clockmaker, and understanding, he said, for what he recognized was the first time, the actual shape of what she had been doing. In the second paragraph he wrote, "I am not writing this to ask you to come back. I am writing it because it is true and because I should have known it long ago. You were not simply a wife keeping my house. You were the better part of how this mill functioned, and I never said so because I never fully looked." The last paragraph said, "The sparrows are back in the front garden. I thought you would want to know." Selina sat with the letter for a long time. Then she set it face down on the table and went out to help Matilda with the kitchen garden fence, because her hands needed something to do. "Good letter or bad letter?" Matilda called from across the yard. "Complicated letter," Selina called back. She picked up a trowel and started working. What Selina did not know, sitting in that garden, was that something had happened in Kenton 2 days before the letter was sent that had already shifted the shape of things in ways she had not anticipated. It started with a man named Mortimer Aldred. Mortimer owned the 2nd largest mill in the county and had for years wanted to absorb the Hartwell London contracts, specifically the Hargreaves account, which was the most lucrative in the region. When word got out that Selina had left, Mortimer saw an opening, not in the marriage itself, but in what it suggested. A distracted man, a business in minor disorder, a possible moment of weakness. He began putting a different version of the story into circulation. Quietly, carefully, the way certain men do when they want to create a problem without being seen to cause it. The version he offered was not that Selina had left because of what her husband had said. The version was that there was money missing from the mill's accounts. Not much, he implied, but enough. and that whoever had been managing those accounts without proper oversight might have reason to leave before anyone looked closely. He did not say Selina's name directly. He didn't need to. Within a week, the implication had its own momentum. Clifford heard it on a Thursday at the wool exchange. From a man who told him with the uncomfortable sympathy of someone delivering news he wished he weren't. Clifford stood in the middle of the exchange floor, with a contract in his hand, and felt something move through him that was the clearest and most uncomplicated feeling he'd had in months. He set the contract down. He walked out. He rode directly to Mortimer Aldred's office, and when the man appeared at the door with his foreman beside him, Clifford did not dismount. He looked down at Mortimer and said, in a voice that carried clearly to every man in the yard, "I know what story you have been putting around about my wife. You will stop. You will correct it wherever it has been said, and you will make clear that what you implied was a lie you invented, because you wanted our London accounts, and saw a moment of weakness to exploit. If I hear that version from one more person in this county, I will be at our solicitor's office by the end of the week. My wife's name will not be used to serve your purposes." Mortimer opened his mouth. "I'm not asking," Clifford said. He turned his horse and rode back toward Kenton, and the feeling in his chest as he rode, that clean, certain anger, began to shade into something quieter and considerably less comfortable. He had defended Selina's name in front of witnesses without hesitating, and underneath the rightness of it was a question he could not avoid. Why had it taken a lie about her for him to speak about her that way? He had gone 8 years calling her capable, 8 years saying she managed things well. He had never once, in any conversation in any room in Kenton, spoken about Selina Hartwell with that kind of force. He had defended her reputation against a false accusation. He had never once championed her truth. He rode home slowly, and that thought rode with him all the way. The story of what Clifford had said to Mortimer Aldred spread through Kenton faster than any story the town had circulated in years. By the following morning it had reached Harrogate. Matilda told Selina at breakfast, presenting the information with the careful neutrality of a woman offering evidence and letting it stand on its own. Selina was quiet for a long time. "He went himself," she said finally. "He didn't write a letter. He didn't send the solicitor. He rode there himself." "He did," Matilda said. "And he said it in front of people." "He did." Selina picked up her fork and set it down again. "That doesn't fix anything." "No," Matilda agreed. "It doesn't change 8 years. It doesn't." Selina picked up her fork and actually used it this time. They ate in silence for a while. "Why do you think he did it?" Selina asked at last. Matilda looked at her over the rim of her coffee cup. "You know why." "Tell me." "Because he is standing in the empty space where you were," Matilda said simply. "And men like Clifford Hartwell don't learn things quickly. They learn them when the thing is gone and the silence it leaves behind is louder than anything they expected." She set down her cup. "The question is not why he did it. The question is what you do with the information." Selina sat with that. It landed somewhere deep and stayed. "I don't know yet," she said. "That's the honest answer." "That's a good answer," Matilda said. "Honest ones usually are." Clifford came back to Harrogate on a Saturday morning 3 weeks later. He came with no papers, no practical excuse, nothing in his hands but his hat, which he held on his knee, and turned occasionally without appearing to notice he was doing it. Selina came out to the porch. Matilda brought coffee and went inside with the studied deliberateness of a woman who had decided not to be obvious about it. They sat across from each other in the cold autumn air, and gathered themselves for something that mattered. Clifford spoke first. "I've been trying to think of what to say to you," he said, looking at his hat rather than at her. "I've written things down and crossed them out. I've thought through conversations in my own head, and then heard how they sounded and started over." A pause. "I keep arriving at the same problem. I don't have a language for this. I was raised by a man who believed that providing was the same as caring, and I believed it too, without ever questioning whether the two things were actually the same. I built 8 years on that belief." He looked up at her. "The belief was wrong." Selina was very still. "I know what you said the night you left," he continued. "You asked if I saw you, and I gave you the honest answer I had available, which was the answer of a man who had been looking in the wrong direction for 8 years, and had no idea." He paused. "I didn't know you." The air between them went quiet. "Tell me something then," Selina said. He looked at her. "Tell me 3 things about Selina Marchmont," she said quietly. Not Mrs. Hartwell, not his wife, not the woman who managed his accounts, Selina. He was quiet. She watched him think, real thinking, not the scramble for a socially adequate response. His hands tightened slightly on his hat. You check the final column of a ledger before you read any other line, he said. I watched you do it the first week we were married, with the household books. I thought it was habit. I thought about it later and I think you do it because you learned young that things can look orderly on every page and still come out wrong at the end. So you check the end first. Before you trust anything, you need to know the balance holds. Selina had not expected that. She went very still. I don't know if that's right, he said. It is, she said quietly. It's exactly right. Something shifted in his face, not relief, something more careful than that. Second, he said. When you're working through a problem, you trace numbers on your palm, with your finger, like you're writing in invisible ink. You do it when you think no one is watching. I have seen you do it at dinner parties, under the table, when the conversation turned to something that needed working out in your head. He stopped. I noticed it 3 years ago and never said anything. I should have asked you what you were working on. Selina pressed her lips together. Her eyes were dry, but it was taking some effort. Third, he said. He stopped. He looked at his hands, then back at her. Third is not an observation. It is something I understand now that I didn't before. You give everything to every corner of your life, and save almost nothing for yourself. You have been doing it so long that you have nearly forgotten there is a self to save anything for. And that is partly because you have spent 8 years living with a man who made everything you kept for yourself feel like less than what you gave to him and his mill and his house. He held her gaze and did not look away. I am not going to tell you that isn't true. It is true. I want you to know that I can see it now. The porch was absolutely quiet. A sparrow somewhere in Matilda's yard went through a small repertoire of sound and then fell silent. Selina looked at Clifford Hartwell across 8 years, and one question that had always been there, and felt something shift inside her that was not forgiveness. Not yet, maybe not for a long time, but was something adjacent to it. Something that had a future in it. How long have you been watching me? She said at last. Her voice was very quiet. Apparently not long enough, he said, and apparently longer than I knew. The screen door opened, and Matilda appeared with a plate of biscuits and the expression of a woman who had heard enough through the window to know when to materialize with food. She set the plate on the small table between them and went back inside without a word. The appearance of the biscuits made everything slightly more survivable. Selina reached for one. So did Clifford. They ate in silence for a moment, and the silence was different from any silence they had shared before. Not avoidance. Not the absence of something that should have been there. The presence of two people who had just said true things and were waiting, carefully, to see what the true things meant. I haven't decided anything, Selina said. I know, he said. I'm not asking you to. She set down her biscuit and looked at him steadily. I need you to understand something. I loved you, Clifford. I want you to know that. Not because it makes any of this simpler, but because it is true, and I have been carrying it without saying it for 8 years. And that has been its own kind of dishonesty. He was very still. I loved you, she said again, and I built myself around the hope that someday you would see me, really see me, and when I asked you that night and you gave me your honest answer, I understood I had been waiting for something I should have demanded years ago, or let go of years ago, and I had done neither. I had simply waited. She met his eyes. You answered me honestly. I don't wish you hadn't. A lie would have been worse. But the answer broke something real, not pride, not comfort. Something I had been standing on for 8 years. She paused. I will not go back to what it was. Not a softer version with the same structure underneath. If anything comes next, it has to actually be different. Not managed, not performed. I know, he said immediately. I mean it, Clifford. And I genuinely don't know whether you're capable of that. I'm not saying it to be unkind. I don't know if you know either. He held her gaze. He did not flinch. He did not pull back into the careful reserve she had known so long. No, he said quietly. I don't know if I'm capable of it. I know I want to be. I know I understand for the first time what it would require. He paused. I am asking you for the chance to find out. Not forgiveness. Not a promise from you. Just the chance. Selina looked at him for a long moment. Come back in 3 weeks, she said. Come on a Saturday when it's cold enough for proper tea. We'll talk then. He put his hat on. He stood. Thank you for speaking to me, he said. Don't thank me yet, she said. Talk to Ezra before you go back to Kenton. He's been covering for the gaps you don't know about. He deserves to hear from you directly." Clifford nodded. He walked to the gate and then stopped. "Selina," he said quietly. She waited. "I'm sorry it took me this long to look." She looked at him for a moment. "I know you are," she said. "Show me." He left. She watched him go down the lane until the sound of his motorcar had faded completely, and then she went inside and sat at Matilda's kitchen table and let herself sit with the question Clara, Matilda, had been asking her all along. "What do you do with the information?" She was beginning to see the shape of an answer, and it was not simply about Clifford. It was about what she wanted her own life to look like. She had spent 8 years building things inside the limits of what someone else needed from her. She was not sorry for the work. She did not regret the care she had taken, the quiet competence she had brought to everything her hands had touched. But she was 29 years old, and it felt considerably older, and she was finished building things she did not own. Whatever came next was going to be hers. She picked up the cooperative's ledger from the table and got back to work, and outside the Harrogate afternoon held still and cold, and somewhere upstairs Matilda was humming to herself. And the whole quiet room felt like the first page of something Selina had not yet let herself read. She let herself turn the page. It felt like the most honest thing she had done in years. 3 weeks later, Clifford came back on a Saturday. It was cold enough for proper tea, as she had specified, and Matilda made it without being asked. They sat on the porch wrapped in coats, and they talked. And then they talked again the Saturday after that, and the Saturday after that. Clifford talked in a way Selina had never once heard from him. Without the managed reserve, without the careful distance, he kept between himself and anything that required him to feel it. He told her about his father, who had believed that providing and loving were interchangeable, and had never questioned the difference. He told her what it had cost him not to question it either. He told her, on the third Saturday, about a moment 6 months into their marriage, when he had walked past the sitting room and seen her at her desk with her ledger and a cup of tea, and something had moved in him that he had not had a word for, and he had walked on, without stopping, and he had spent 8 years not stopping, and he understood now what that had cost her. He made mistakes in these conversations. He said things that still landed wrong, and when she said so he went quiet and then said simply, "You're right," and asked what she had actually meant. He was learning. She could see him learning in real time. Not smooth, not graceful, but genuine, which was considerably more convincing than smooth would have been. She told him what she needed. The cooperative needed to become a formal business with her name on it, not his. She wanted a separate account, her own, not subject to his approval or his oversight. She wanted to be part of the decisions about the mill's properties from the beginning, present when the thinking happened, not informed about conclusions after they were already made. And she wanted, most of all, to be asked what she thought, not what she had managed, not what she had produced, but what she actually thought, what she worried about, what she cared about when no one was watching. He heard her. He agreed without negotiating. She came home to Hartwell House on the first Saturday of December. She drove herself in Matilda's small motor, borrowed for the occasion. She pulled up the front drive, set the brake, and climbed out with her traveling bag and 2 boxes of account books, and the cooperative's new business registration papers, which she had collected from the county office the day before. Clifford came out when he heard the motor. He came to the gate and stood there, and she pulled to a stop and looked at him across the distance of the yard. "You drove yourself," he said. "I did," she said. "Help me with the boxes." He came forward and took the heavier one. They carried things inside together, which was practical and also felt, in the way that practical things sometimes can, like exactly the right way to begin. Mrs. Hartley appeared in the hallway, with the expression of a woman who had been hoping for this moment for months and was determined not to make it excessive. "Mrs. Hartwell," she said simply, "welcome home. There's a roast on." "Thank you, Mrs. Hartley," Selina said. "It smells wonderful." Ezra appeared from the back of the house, hat in hand. "Good to have you back, ma'am," he said quietly. "Good to be back, Ezra," she said. She meant it. That evening they sat by the fire in the sitting room. Her sitting room, which Clifford had left exactly as she had arranged it. Nothing moved, nothing reorganized. Her books and her papers and her small collection of things exactly as they had been when she left. He had left it for her, not preserved it as a monument, but left it as a room that was waiting for its person to come back. She noticed. She did not comment, but she noticed. They talked for a long time about things that had nothing to do with the mill. About what she had been reading. About what the cooperative could become in 5 years, if they found the right landlord for a proper office. About what he remembered of his childhood in this house, and what she remembered of hers in her father's smaller one, and the shapes those memories had left in each of them. At some point the fire burned lower, and the room grew quieter, and Clifford looked at her across the hearth and said, "I love you, Selina." He said it simply, without preparation, the way a man says something he has finally found the right words for. "I didn't know what that meant," he said. "I didn't know what it required. I buried it under everything I thought mattered more, and I am telling you it was always there. I just never looked for it." The room was very still. "I know," she said softly. "I could see it sometimes, in the margins. I want to be better at showing you the center of it." She looked at him for a long moment. She thought about what she had done her whole life. Check the final column before she's trusted any of the numbers in between. She had done it with ledgers. She had done it with contracts. She had done it with people, needing to know the ending before she let herself care about the beginning. She had walked into these 3 months without reading ahead. She had come back to this house without knowing, not truly, whether it would be different, whether he would be different, whether she would be different enough for it to hold. She knew now, not because he had said the words, because of everything before the words. The 3 Saturdays, the letters, the morning he rode to Mortimer Aldred's office without being asked, the boxes carried in from the motor car, the sitting room left exactly as she had left it. "I love you too," she said. "I have for a long time, and I am choosing to be here, Clifford, not because I have nowhere else to go. I built somewhere else to go, and I chose to come back. That is the only version of this I will accept." "I know," he said. "And if by spring we are back to what we were." "We won't be," he said, and then, more honestly, "I don't intend to let us be, and if I slip into old habits I want you to tell me, directly. I am asking you to tell me." She looked at him for a moment. "Then we start from here," she said. "From what we both know now. From the truth even when it's hard." "Especially when it's hard," he said. "Yes," she said, "especially then." The fire settled between them, and the December dark pressed at the windows of Hartwell House, and Kenton was quiet out on the moor. And Selina Hartwell sat in her chair in her room in her home, chosen, on her own terms, with her eyes fully open, and understood that what she had come back to was not what she had left. It was better. It was harder and more honest and considerably less comfortable, and in every way that mattered it was better. She picked up her book. He picked up his. The room was warm. The silence between them was the best kind. The kind that belongs to 2 people who have finally learned to be present with each other, without managing the space in between, without filling it or containing it, simply inhabiting it together, and finding that it holds. Selina Marchmont Hartwell had walked out of her husband's house in October, with 1 bag and a tin of savings and 8 years of invisible work she had finally decided to stop pretending was invisible. She had walked back in December with her name on a business registration, and a cooperative that was going to outlast everyone's doubts about it, and the clear, grounded certainty of a woman who had chosen freely, from strength, and who knew exactly what that meant. She had not been lost. She had simply been finding her way home the long way around, the honest way, the only way that was ever going to be worth arriving.